Hello, everyone. This is Gary from Timeline Astrology, and this is a bit about the course I'm teaching in 2024 on Indian astrology timing techniques. This is not for somebody who is a complete beginner to astrology, who doesn't know anything about the planets, signs, or houses. You would need to know the ABCs of astrology because it takes astrology to a whole other level and starts predicting. So I have split it into three modules, though: the novice, the enthusiast, and the professional. The novice is somebody who hasn't ever studied a Vedic or Indian astrology before, even if you're a seasoned Western astrologer and you've never picked up a Vedic astrology book. So this would be for you, the novice. The enthusiast is somebody who has read a lot of books and perhaps has taken other courses. And then the professional is somebody who is a professional Vedic astrologer, somebody who works in the field, in other words. So they are the three modules. So it's important when you study anything that you have the correct data, especially as this is a science. It is also an art, and I'll talk about that in a while in terms of it is an art form. It's intuitive. It's not just collecting data, but certainly in the beginning, you have to be really good at collecting a lot of data. And that includes obviously learning all of the ins and outs of how the science works, but also the basics of how to collect birth chart details. So the time, place, and date of birth are important, of course, and getting the correct data inputted into software tools. And the software tools are important also. You need those because most people are not calculating charts by hand these days. People don't have the time to do that or the inclination. So you have to have a software. I can recommend a free software to download or a paid software. And once you have those, you can start reading charts. I think it's important not to work with friends and family's charts simply because when you do a lot of readings for friends and family, there are some issues here in terms of crossing a line with family members, especially when you, in this case, know a lot about what is likely to happen to them in the future. It's not ideal. I'm not talking about reading charts in a very generalized way and talking about somebody's personality traits. These are timing techniques, and you have to think about all of the ethical conundrums that this offers. So I don't recommend you reading friends and family's charts. I do recommend, though, that all of the students read each other's charts and predict for each other on the course. And I do recommend using celebrities' charts, well-known figures' charts, who won't hear anything of what we're speaking of about their charts, and of course, your own chart. There are a lot of challenges, obviously, in making predictions, and there is no astrologer on the planet that can get it right 100% of the time. And that's an important caveat to throw in there every time you make a prediction. But the other thing about that is that it's important to make mistakes. It's really important to make mistakes in a course because the more mistakes you make in a course, the more you learn. And the more mistakes you make in a course, the less you're going to make out there in the field, as it were. So when you're reading somebody's chart, you realize when you've made a lot of mistakes, you're humbled, first of all, by that. So you're not going to go too far too soon. You're going to use the knowledge base that you have, and you can use any knowledge base you have and still make really accurate predictions. It's really kind of akin to, where are you swimming in the pool? Are you swimming in the deep end or the shallow end? You can swim in either end. And if you're not really a proficient swimmer, you might be better off swimming in the more shallow end so that you can simply stand up, take a moment, and then start again. If you go too far too soon and you go into the deep end and you don't have as much knowledge as those who are in the deep end, you're likely to get lost really quickly. So it's important, again, that you consider where you are on this journey: novice, enthusiast, or professional. The three-step approach is something that I have coined this term, but it's something that all Vedic astrologers do, maybe unbeknownst to themselves. But essentially, there are three components of reading a Vedic chart. First is the birth chart. You have to know how to read a chart, first of all. You have to know all of the computations, all of the combinations or yogas in a chart. You then have to take that and progress it. You have to be able to use a timing technique. And the main timing technique in Indian astrology is dashas. Dashas are essentially how the chart is coming to life. Then the third one are transits. And so you have to overlay those transits over the dashas, which are overlaid from the birth chart. And this is really the three-step approach that you have to get really good at in order for you to make predictions. Intuition is so important when reading a chart that really without it, you cannot read a chart. You can learn a lot. You can learn a lot of data. You can gather more and more data, but at some point your mind is going to falter when you're not relying on something that you already rely on to some degree, but you might not consciously acknowledge. Intuition is like a muscle. It's not the mind. It's not your feelings. It's not about thinking or feeling. It's about something deeper at work. It's about knowing. It's not about working out anything, actually. It's just the knowing. When you study Vedic astrology, you're going to have to combine that with meditating and contemplating all of the many computations that you're learning through data, but also all of the many implications about what you're learning, about what your interpretations are. So every time you learn something new, you're going to have to sit with that for a while and contemplate it and really flesh out and think deeply about its implications. And so combined with the meditation practice, this is really what's going to see you through in being able to make sound predictions. There are so many logical fallacies, so many platitudes, so many things that we just say over and over again because we repeat whatever has been taught to us. And that gets handed down from generation to generation. It's never questioned. You wonder really sometimes some of those platitudes, whether they should be questioned. Some of them, do have sound logic behind them, but some are logical fallacies. And an example of that would be, it is raining, therefore you are wet. Or to translate it into an astrology, Saturn is transiting your moon, therefore you are depressed. So you can see that's a logical fallacy, and you cannot make statements like that about a person's chart when you really don't know. You have to know the ins and outs of it. You have to ask questions. And then by gathering more and more data, you can actually then make more sound predictions based on what the person has experienced in the past, perhaps with Saturn's transit over their moon, and in context in terms of their current life experience and so on, how mature they are, etc., etc. Logical fallacies are commonplace, biases are commonplace, and platitudes also are commonplace in astrology, not just Vedic astrology. So it's very easy, of course, because the mind likes to latch on to certain things and push certain things away. The mind has its likes and dislikes. This is reflected in the moon. And so every astrologer coming to a chart and interpreting a chart has their likes and dislikes. And everybody, including myself, are going to have that. You just have to be aware that you're doing that you have your biases, and you have to be mindful of that when you're reading somebody's chart, somebody perhaps from a different culture, from a different background, a different age group, a different whatever. You have to be really open-minded when you're reading a chart. And the only way, again, to open your mind is to sit and be still with it, because the mind contracted around a certain thought and a certain data point that it gets fixated on is not going to be a good reading for the person. They're going to feel like you're just lumping them in with everyone else that you read for and giving them a label that everyone else before them has got based on this planet in this sign in this house. So it's really important that you get beyond this good and bad astrology. And even if you do use the words good and bad at times, there's nothing wrong with that. But again, just think of the phrase, everything is good for something. This is an important one to consider because you are an individual. You are a human being. You have your faults. Everybody has their faults. I have my faults. I'm a human being. When I read a chart, I am as aware about my own biases as much as possible, my own chart, in other words, my own dashes, my own transits, and what's alive in me, and why I'm making that kind of interpretation and prediction based on where I'm coming from. As Osho has said in the past, there are as many worlds as there are minds. So every astrologer is looking at a chart in a different way, is looking at the world in a different way, therefore looking at you in a different way when they're reading your chart. And it's really important that you know you're doing that. And it doesn't mean that you necessarily stop all of that, that you can cut it all out. You cannot. But at least you're more aware of it. And if you say things that are more biased and very obviously so, it might just give you pause for thought, and you might reconsider how you're phrasing certain things. This is such an important part, and I want to just repeat it here again, that if you're not meditating and if you're not contemplating all of the many implications of reading a chart, you are at some point going to get lost in the vast ocean of knowledge that is Vedic astrology. You're not going to be able to computate all of that information, first of all, practically, but also you're not going to be able to, when a situation arises, when somebody presents something in their chart that you've never come across before, and by the way, that's every single chart, you're not going to be able to rise to the occasion and say what needs to be said in the moment. You need to have a practice of meditation, of contemplation, of deliberation. That has to be as long, if not longer, than the study itself. So they are some of the things to think about if you're joining this course. Again, think about whether you're a novice, think about whether you're an enthusiast or a professional, and contact me if you're not sure about that, by the way, because I really don't want somebody starting on the course where they kind of feel like, oh, maybe this was a bit too advanced for me at this point. Like I said, the course is not a basic course. It's not the beginner's course of learning what the planets are, the signs, and the houses are. It's a course in taking all of that and start progressing it through the Vedic chart so that you can, with more and more charts. We're gonna work with a lot of charts. We're gonna have 3 modules for each. There's a set module. There are case studies in each. There are self-assessments. You're going to be working with charts from the get-go. So I hope that's been of help. Some information there about the course. I hope you can join me on this course. Remember, it starts in May and lasts until November. You can find the exact start date and all the dates and timings on the website timelineastrology.com. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. You can contact me by email at info@timelineastrology.com, and I look forward to welcoming you.